Hello and welcome to the Flix Forum podcast, where each episode we usually go back and we look at a Netflix original film in the order of release. However, today we've got a special bonus episode where we are looking at Netflix's 2026 documentary called Untold UK, Vinnie Jones. This one is directed by David Tryhorn and Ben Nicholas and stars Vinnie Jones, Dave Bassett, John Fashanu, Piers and Sam Hamman. I'm Jesse. I'm your host. Thank you for joining me today for this special episode. As always, if this is a film, a documentary you haven't seen yet and you're interested in checking it out, give us a pause and come back a little bit later on because I'm going to spoil it throughout. However, this is a lot of public information already in this doco that people probably are aware of. Vinnie Jones, a very prolific personality, not only through the football world, the Premier League and British football, but also through Hollywood too. So I'm sure you're probably aware of him, aware of his story. This is the third and final part of the Untold UK Netflix original documentaries that they put out just in time for the World Cup. Obviously, the World Cup is coming to the closing stages, very close to crowning a winner, and I thought I'd get on board and cover these three documentaries. The first documentaries I've covered on this show in 500 plus episodes, so there you go. Let's jump into this actual documentary with the Fast Flicks, where we do a quick little summary of what the film's all about. So this one is the story of an over-the-top controversial footballer turned movie star. There you go. I'm not giving too much away. If we jump onto Netflix, when you load the film on Netflix, it says an on-pitch enforcer, off-pitch headliner, football hardman Vinnie Jones tells his story of fame, fallout, and fresh start in this unfiltered documentary. I've got some questions there about unfiltered. And then as you actually jump into Netflix, it says, this is the story of Vinnie Jones's rise, fall, and comeback against odds and red cards. From one of football's most notorious hardmen to FA Cup winner. There you go. So Vinnie Jones, let's get into it. The translations around the world. So in Spanish, it's Exposed in the UK, Vinnie Jones. Chinese, it's called Sports Secrets, the Great Britain chapter of Vinnie Jones, and in Polish it's UK Sporting Stories, Vinnie Jones. There's nothing too much that deviates from the actual title. If we talk about Vinnie Jones as a personality, the most recent sort of stuff he's been doing is a TV show called The Country, which has had 3 seasons and I think has recently been cancelled. But this follows Vinnie as he turned his back on Hollywood for rural life. There we go. It also saw him embark on a new relationship with his personal assistant, Emma Ford. This romance came after Vinnie was left devastated by the death of his beloved wife, Tanya, to cancer in 2019. They were childhood sweethearts and married for 25 years. That's a little bit of an interesting context behind this doco because there is no mention whatsoever of his personal life in this documentary. There's no mention of his upbringing. There's no mention of his love life. There's no mention if he's got any kids. There's no mention of who his current partner is. So this just focuses on Vinnie Jones, the character, I guess, the character that played football and the character that is in Hollywood films too. This did release on Netflix worldwide on the 26th of May 2026. What are critics and audiences saying about this documentary? If we go to Rotten Tomatoes, there's only one review. This is the same as all of these untold stories. I didn't even check. I should have checked if it was the same reviewer, but it's fresh. There's nothing from the audience. On IMDb, it sits at a 7 out of 10 on 1,500 ratings. Very solid score, but the lowest out of these 3 Netflix original documentaries for Untold UK. On Letterboxd, again, it's the lowest out of the 3, but it still sits at a 3.3 out of 5 on 2,800 ratings and has been logged by 3,700 people. So, again, fairly positive from the people that have jumped on to log this. But what are my early thoughts on this documentary? I think this is probably the most fun of the 3 Untold UK football docos. Vinnie is a character of his own, and I think there's nothing in this that he would have allowed to bring him down. I think it's a celebration of his career rather than a deep dive into what makes him tick or some of the key things that occurred throughout his career. So there you go. If you're on board for just sitting back, relaxing, having a laugh, looking at this bloke who is bigger than big, then you're probably going to enjoy this as well. So let's talk about the people in this documentary. This is similar to the first Untold documentary, because this focuses just on one person, which is Vinnie Jones, and there's lots of commentary around how football's been his life, and he wouldn't have survived without football. And I think he's had to manage the unconventional way of getting there, a bit like Jamie Vardy, the first one in this 3-part series. He didn't go through the academies of football, and he worked in construction and played football in between, and he's a hard man, and obviously, as I've said, one of the most controversial footballers or personalities in football that's ever existed, and the idea that he doesn't handle rejection very well because he wants things his way, and this is seen through his interviews throughout this documentary too. Some other characters that we're introduced to: Dave Bassett. This is Wimbledon, the football club that signs Vinnie, and this is the manager who signs him, and Vinnie obviously felt a lot of gratitude towards him for taking a chance on this guy that was probably a little bit brash, probably a little bit not in that mould of a regular footballer. And I think that it's clear Vinnie felt let down when Dave Bassett, as the manager, left the club early in his career, because he had so much faith in Vinnie, and Vinnie wanted to repay that faith as well. One of Vinnie's teammates that plays a large part in this documentary is John Fashanu, who comes across as a bit of a mafioso almost. I've got to laugh at that, but the idea, I think, of him is he's a bit of a contrast. He's educated and the opposite of Vinnie, but obviously Vinnie's best friend at Wimbledon as a team, because they were almost the heads of this crazy gang they created of these brash footballers, and John felt abandoned when Vinnie left the team for a little bit too. But he comes back to that idea that friendship's key, and it's almost like family when you're playing football together. And my interpretation is that that Fash sort of helped him get his start in TV as the host of Gladiators, and that sort of led to that personality, that big personality that's seen through film and television too. Piers Morgan, I was very, very interested when he popped up on screen, but and I think that he's much bigger than almost this documentary now, but for him to come back and do this is pretty wild, to be honest, because it seems like Piers got his start through print journalism, but telling the stories and creating a little bit of a contract with Vinnie about telling stories through his paper and creating those articles, and he had this great connection with Vinnie, so I thought that was very interesting too. The only other person I'll touch on is Sam Hamman, who was the owner of Wimbledon for 20 plus years, I think, and obviously very loyal to Vinnie, and didn't ever really want to see him leave the club, and was very stubborn in that at times too. The directors of this one: David Tryhorn. 5 directing credits, 13 producer credits, a lot of football docos, and that's where we sort of bring in Ben Nicholas, who pretty much looks like he's done a lot of the work with David on the similar football things as well. But the only difference here, I guess, is that Ben Nicholas was a cutting room assistant on Danny Boyle's film 28 Days Later. So there you go. There's a little interesting thing there as well. Let's talk about some scenes. What are some scenes that worked? There's a scene where Bassett, he takes that chance on Vinnie and pretty much says, we could get him to do maintenance work around the club at worst if this gamble on him didn't pay off. I thought that was funny. I sort of said this before as well. Piers Morgan, when he rocks up on screen, that surprised me. I was a bit taken aback by that. The new manager rocks up, Bobby Gould, and he sort of comes along and he's very matter of fact, and he says, I'm going to call you Vincent, not Vinnie. That made me laugh, especially with Vinnie and how... not unprofessional, but how I guess doesn't play the line as much as this. Vinnie playing against Newcastle, and there's a scene. This hit the headlines, and photos of this went around because he grabs Gascoigne Gazza, I think he referred to him, grabs him in the male genitalia area. I thought that was quite funny. The FA Cup versus Liverpool, just the idea of Vinnie just being so brash about going out and smashing a player to sort of get them the upper edge. I enjoyed that. I really liked the thought of a collective too. Like, Vinnie is a stage where he goes to the team. It's the start of a new season. He's like, let's all go skinheads for the team photo. And they didn't want to. And he questioned that idea of team spirit and sort of highlighted the change, not only in society around professional sports, but the idea of football too, and how it was developing as well. there's a scene, this is almost Vinnie post-career, where he's paid by Piers Morgan to go over and cover a game in Dublin, and he sort of just takes the cop out to watch the game on TV instead of actually going to the game and reporting on it. He watches it on TV in a pub and gets so drunk and misses this international game, which is abandoned, which very rarely happens too. And in the follow-up, he bites the nose of a journalist, and his apology was, well, I'm sorry, I thought it was a joke. It was just sort of highlighted the character that Vinnie was or is. And the back end, it's very short and very sort of just felt like it was tacked on a bit, but his career in Hollywood, and there's a few clips there, including Guy Ritchie on screen. He just looked so young, and there's an interview with Brad Pitt, or a question from Brad Pitt asking about Vinnie, and he's like, well, Vinnie's original. It was just very humorous, and I probably would have liked some more of that Hollywood side of things, to be honest, if I've got to critique anything in this one. But what are some themes, some ideas, some motifs in this one? The idea that appetite for cash, which Vinnie obviously held very highly, and the role of the media, this one plays a big part, as well as a part of Vinnie's personality building almost. I think the idea that he could get more money or more pay from doing leaks to journalists or talking to journalists than he actually did by playing on the field. That's a little bit wild, but ties in too with the idea of all publicity is good publicity, and you've got to ask, are bad boys, are they good for sport? Because there's often the case, you think about Dennis Rodman. Think about Dennis Rodman in the NBA and the stories he had as well. That this also ties in that changing of the guard of a footballer too. When the Premier League started in the UK too, it sort of turned the sport more professional, rather than a bunch of blokes who could go and smash a couple of pints and some darts and then rock up to training the next morning a bit later. It sort of turned it into training and gym and those types of things too. But teamwork does pay off, and friendships, that idea of brotherhood too. And you've got to take a risk sometimes, and whether that risk is on pure talent and not worrying too much about the personality side of things, and because you got to be someone, you got to leave a mark, you've got to seize the moment and be who you are too. But you also do need to understand when that time to grow up occurs too, because times have changed, and I think this is highlighted very briefly in this too, but for sporting people back in the late 80s, early 90s, the mental health support that is surrounded through sporting clubs now probably wasn't available for Vinnie in his prime, which probably could have supported him a lot too. And you've got to type that idea of a myth versus a legend. The myth of Vinnie Jones, or is it the legend of Vinnie Jones? Up to you to interpret. What else did I take away from this one too? I think the archival footage throughout this one is probably used more than in a lot of the other ones, because to me it felt like maybe the archival footage wasn't necessarily about the footballer. Like the others were all about the football and the highlights, whereas this one, yes, there's the football highlights, but a lot of the archival footage here sort of put out those cameos that sort of surprised me seeing on screen. Like throughout you see Princess Diana, and I mentioned Brad Pitt before, Ewan McGregor's there, Ben Elton is one of the talk show hosts that Vinnie talks to, Guy Ritchie, Elton John, like these are all big names that appear in this documentary too. Some other questions, some other pondering, some other thoughts to finish this one off. I had to look this one up because Vinnie makes a bit of a joke about he was a hod carrier, and he sort of makes this big stance and calls people out saying, lucky I'm not a hod carrier because he's so good at football. I had to look it up. I had no idea what it was, but it's someone who carries bricks. I had to think, what a boring job. I couldn't think of anything worse. Some things that go unanswered in this one, which I think it's a very superficial look, I sort of mentioned before, but the idea about Vinnie, we don't understand anything about him. Like, what was his childhood like? Was it rough? Is that why he is, or how he is? And the idea, did anyone try to help him with his temper and his aggression, and was he feeling that he was sort of cornered into this tough guy reputation? He had to uphold this because the media was pushing it, and were they pushing him to be more radical than he actually was? And this aggression, was that sort of hiding the fact that he was actually a good footballer? and I really why weren't there more questions being asked of Vinnie, in particular in this documentary, to try and get him a bit emotional, to pull on those heartstrings? Because I'd love to see some Vinnie actually emotional in this as well. You've got is he a positive role model? Obviously Britain loves a bad boy. the tabloids, all that sort of stuff. You think about David Beckham, that sort of stuff. But that ties in too with Vinny, that idea of his character. Like, can you change a character? In between clubs, there's always that mention of he was who he was, especially when he went back to Wimbledon as well. So, like, what's he like as a person? Can he change? And I guess you've got to look at his Hollywood career almost too to say he plays that same character. He's got, I think it was 110 plus credits on IMDb, which is pretty wild considering this is post football career. Some of the films that stand out, obviously he's built this connection with Guy Ritchie, but Lock, Stock and Two Smoking Barrels in 1998, I think, if we go back to then he did Gone in 60 Seconds, did Snatch again with Guy Ritchie, Swordfish, which was that film with Halle Berry, did comedy, Eurotrip, She's the Man, which is another football film with Amanda Bynes off the top of my head. He was in X-Men, Last Stand, he did Garfield, Voices, A Tale of Two Kitties, The Condemned, which was this great WWE film with Stone Cold Steve Austin from memory. He did Year One with Jack Black, Smoking Aces 2, which goes back to that gangster style thing, Voices in Madagascar 3, The Escape Plan, The Magnificent Seven, a Western. He's done a lot of TV, like Elementary, some episodes there, Psych, the reboot of MacGyver, Arrow, that DC TV show, NCIS Los Angeles, Law and Order, Organised Crime. So he's done a lot of side gigs as well, and I think was it The Gentleman, the Guy Ritchie spin-off television show from the film? I think he's been in that too. So there you go. He's done so much. I'm almost considering, should I do a side podcast of all of his TV and film work? I'm going to say no. Got to say no. Finally, like Vinny, the idea, and this just made me think a little bit about his character too and his upbringing, because we got nothing of this in this film, but he says at this moment where he was very depressed and out of it, and he talks about being curled up in the baby position, and it highlighted it because throughout this film he's so good with his sayings and these little one-liners, but he couldn't even get that idea of the, I was curled up in the fetal position right. And it just made me very interested in his education, his background, those types of things. So anyway, I'm ready to wrap this one up. We give the film a rating out of 5 on this show. For me, I think it's probably the most shallow of the three Untold UK stories, and I probably shouldn't be comparing them. I should be looking at them as standalones, but I think there's a big bias in this one towards the idea of celebrating Vinny and who he was, and probably if I'm looking at this as sporting documentaries, it was probably the least inspiring football-wise, but it's still entertaining to watch, and this character of Vinnie Jones, he tells his story, and while it plays it safe, because I think he's probably got a little bit of creative control over it as well, it's still solid. It's a 3.5 out of 5 for me. We're on socials. We have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have X, formerly known as Twitter. Give us a follow, give us a like on those platforms if you can. The question I wanted to ask on social in relation to this film is the idea, I wanted to know, do you think Vinnie Jones has any regrets? And I think it's pretty much the same question I asked for Jamie Vardy, the first one of these docos too, but I think in this case, it's hard not to think about Vinnie Jones as the footballer and the idea of, does he regret not adapting to the new way that football was being played and developed? Because he was a great footballer, and it probably would have been nice to see him continue his career a little bit, but obviously he was all about the cash, he was all about jumping on opportunities, which is great, and jumping over to Hollywood too, but could he have gone further? Could he have highlighted his talents? Other than that, we are back on Monday with our regular episode. We've got 500 plus Netflix original films. We've done our first 3 documentary episodes now with this Untold UK series. Give us a follow, give us a like, download some episodes, share us with your friends if you can, give us a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're listening on. It helps us so much and makes it easier for us to actually get the word out about what we do. Other than that, I hope you've enjoyed this. If you enjoyed this, jump into our regular episodes on Monday, and I'll see you then.